Doug Peterson is off the market, but Eric Bieniemy should be shooting to the top of all of your lists when it comes to the head coaching position for the New Orleans Saints. And are we going to see Michael Thomas back in New Orleans in 2022? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I am your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, Canal Street Chronicles, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Get Upside. Download the free Get Upside app from your App Store or Google Play. And don't forget to use that promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents back per gallon or more on your first fill-up. The New Orleans Saints have requested to meet with Eric Bieniemy for their open head coaching position. So now Eric Bieniemy watch begins in the city of New Orleans because he will very likely leap to the top of the list for many people when it comes to the favorites to replace Sean Payton. Now, the interview is not set up. It sounds like an interview could happen this weekend on Saturday, but as of right now, the New Orleans Saints have simply made it known and have requested and all of that they want to interview Eric Bieniemy. So let's talk about what Eric Bieniemy brings to you if he becomes your New Orleans Saints head coach. And I want to start off with sort of the biggest piece here because Mickey Loomis spoke to New Orleans media here in Mobile. We're still in Mobile, by the way. It's raining outside. But when it comes down to what it is that Eric Bieniemy can bring to you most immediately, you already heard a little bit of it from general manager Mickey Loomis. When he spoke with New Orleans media, he mentioned that one of the biggest pieces of conversation in the midst of all of these head coaching candidate interviews is what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Who are you interested in? What would you like that to look like? And sort of seeing where the synergy is between the candidates and the organization. And in my opinion, out of all of the guys that the Saints have so far identified as potential head coaches, some of which have already gone elsewhere, some of which have not even actually interviewed with them, like in Byron Leftwich's case, I think that Eric Bieniemy gives you the best option in terms of what you can turn his employment into at the quarterback position. He would be somebody that a guy like Russell Wilson would want to go to New Orleans and work with. He would be somebody that a young rookie would really be able to benefit from, that Jameis Winston might be looking to return to. It makes such a big difference, right? When you look at when Russell Wilson last year put the New Orleans Saints, along with a few other teams, on his list of places that he would prefer to play, you know that Sean Payton was a big part of that. And if there's any concern over whether or not Sean Payton being gone is going to be able to, or is going to hinder your ability to pull that kind of talent, hiring somebody like Eric Bieniemy, keeping somebody like Pete Carmichael in place and still calling Sean's version, Sean's style with Eric Bieniemy's leadership and his twist and innovation and creativity, I think is enough to be appealing to a high-profile quarterback. So that's a huge win for the Saints if they were to bring in Eric Bieniemy in that case. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, since I kind of talked about the dynamic between Eric Bieniemy and Pete Carmichael kind of hypothetically in this situation. If that was the case, the reason why I think that becomes really intriguing is because a lot of these sort of dings against Eric Bieniemy have been about the fact that he hasn't been a full-time experienced play caller so far since he's been in Kansas City. He's been working with Andy Reid over there. He kind of comes from that coaching tree. He started there as a running backs coach and then became their offensive coordinator over the course of the past few seasons. And we've recounted over episodes the high-level offenses that he has helped to produce and create with Patrick Mahomes at the helm and incredible weapons over in Kansas City, but a lot of it has to do with the scheme as well. So if you're concerned about play calling, though, just something to consider. The New Orleans Saints so far have interviewed only two, or have requested to interview a few offensive coaches. Two of them have they actually interviewed so far, Doug Peterson, who we're going to talk about here in just a moment, as well as Eric Bieniemy if he gets the interview coming up this week. The other two offensive coaches that they've shown some interest in are Brian Daboll, who's now with the New York Giants. I know our friend over at Locked On Giants, Patricia Traina, and our friend over at Locked On Gators, Brandon Olson, both very excited about that hire. And then, of course, Doug Peterson, who the Saints interviewed earlier this week formerly of the Philadelphia Eagles. We talked about him just a few days ago as well. He has now accepted a job in principal in Jacksonville. You can hear more about that with Tony Wiggins over at Locked on Jags. That will be a very fun episode. I cannot stress that enough. You have to make sure you go and check out Tony. So when you look at what all of those coaches have done so far, that's it in terms of the offensive guys. The rest of the folks that the New Orleans Saints have taken time to look at have been defensive coaches or special teams coaches. So they haven't called offensive plays either. So when it comes down to who's left on this list, unless Byron Leftwich ends up becoming interested in this position, which I don't know if the synergy is there because reportedly Byron Leftwich wants to bring his own offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. Meanwhile, the Saints don't want to blow everything up, right? They want to keep everything intact as best as possible. Eric Bieniemy not being a full-time play caller probably shouldn't matter to you anymore because you're not going to hire a full-time play caller at this point if you're the New Orleans Saints. And that's okay because you have Pete Carmichael in the building as your OC. That hypothetically, if you're able to hold on to him, or if you can bring in an offensive coordinator that is an experienced play caller, then you're in a situation there to where you can make a more seamless transition. The last thing I want to just talk about is kind of highlighting the scheme and what the Kansas City Chiefs have done here over the recent past. And we've kind of broken it all down in numbers already. So let's talk a little bit more about what it just simply looks like and how it could look like with the New Orleans Saints. So when you look at where the New Orleans Saints are, what they have, what they need, and then, of course, what the Kansas City Chiefs have, the Saints are severely diminished on the offensive side in comparison to what Kansas City has. But if you look at trying to build something in New Orleans, you'd probably want to build something to the tune of what's going on in Kansas City. Big speed threats, big bodied receivers that can push deep, that could take the top off of defenses, a nice pass catching tight end that can do a ton for you, and a lot of athleticism as well as a lot of versatility out of the backfield. So right now for the Saints, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, those guys have a role within what we've seen in Kansas City before, even though Michael Thomas's role might shift a little bit differently in New Orleans if Eric Bieniemy were the head coach, but I think he would be okay with that. The other piece of it is when you look at who you want to draft, who it is that you want to bring in, how you want to address some of these skill position players, Eric Bieniemy comes from a school of thought that addresses those skill position players, and that would be good news for New Orleans Saints fans who want to see that offense begin to bolster as well. So for all those reasons, I think that if Eric Bieniemy accepts this head coaching interview, that he's going to jump to the top of the list for a lot of people, and it makes a ton of sense. And if nothing else, he gives you the best chance to bring in an elite quarterback for 2022. So when we talk about Eric Bieniemy, what it is that he brings to the team, we can hit all those points, but let's talk a little bit more about the timeline, talk about blowing things up, talk about the changes that come with the head coach and update you sort of on the New Orleans Saints' extensive head coaching search because they promised one and so far they've delivered. So we're going to get to that and much more as we continue on with today's episode of Locked on Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Get Upside, the best app you're ever going to own outside of maybe that little Bluebird app. You know how much I love that one. But when it comes to the Get Upside app, it's going to save you money. And so there's no better selling point that I have to give you than that. But let me tell you a little bit about how it works. You download the app for free from your App Store, Google Play, wherever it is that you get your apps. And all you have to do is visit one of the select gas stations that's a part of the Get Upside program. Fill up your tank over at that gas station, take a picture of your receipt, and then they're going to give you cash back to your account. And if you use the promo code touchdown on your first use, you're going to get 25 cents back per gallon or more on that first fill up. You're going to get a ton of money coming back to you every time that you end up filling up, and you can withdraw it whenever you want. You can have it back to your bank account. You can send it to your PayPal, or you can even get Amazon gift cards and other brands as well. That's usually the route that I go. And don't forget that promo code touchdown. So you can get 25 cents back per gallon or more on your first deposit. It's the Get Upside app. No catch, free, easy app, super simple to use. Some folks are making $200, $300 back using this app. So go ahead and check them out. And don't forget that promo code touchdown for 25 cents back per gallon or more on your first fill up. It's a promo code touchdown with the Get Upside app. And of course, we got to give a shout out to our friends over at betonline.net, the best place to go that has you covered all season for more props, more odds, more lines, everything that you need as football continues throughout the playoffs. And of course, leading right up to the big game, which is right around the corner. And don't forget, we're going to be there, right? We're going to be there on Radio Row all next week, bringing you a ton of content and a ton of fun stuff, trying to line up a really specific interview for all of y'all here, specifically on Locked on Saints. I'll keep you up to date on all that. But right now, while you're waiting for that, head over to betonline.net. Make sure you get all the information that you need on making the best bets moving forward throughout the rest of the playoffs and everything else going on. Because it's not just football. They also got you covered when it comes to basketball, baseball, hockey, UFC, MMA, and even your favorite Vegas casino games as well. So don't wait. Go and take advantage of all of the amazing offers that are available right now throughout the rest of the 2022 seasons. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you again, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. We talked a bit about what it is that Eric Bieniemy brings if he were to become the New Orleans Saints head coach. But now let's talk about the rest of the head coaches. Let's really update and kind of talk about this, because one of the things that Mickey Loomis, general manager of the New Orleans Saints, promised is that it was going to be an extensive coaching search and that they would take their time with it. So let's update, talk about how extensive this coaching search actually has been. Let's talk about the timeline so far and when we can expect a hire. And we'll talk a little bit about what it means about not wanting to blow up the roster and why that's so important to this team. So let's start off with kind of the list of coaches that they've either been interested in, have already interviewed, or are set to interview, or hoping to interview in Bieniemy's case. So we know the in-house frontrunner right now is Dennis Allen. That has not been a mystery at all. Everybody has sort of seen that. He got the best audition, the best interview opportunity that you can get, that finished in a 9-0 shutout of the Super Bowl champions, Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in what led to, not that the game led to Tom Brady's retirement, but leading up to Tom Brady's retirement. So that is always going to be heightened if it's Sunday Night Football, national. There is no better interview than the one that Dennis Allen already had mid-season. So Dennis Allen is, of course, sitting up there. Darren Rizzi, special teams coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. He's got in-house ties. Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He's got in-house ties as well. He was replaced by Chris Richard just this past offseason. Former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores. We did a whole breakdown about him, the situation, the lawsuit, everything, and how he is a fantastic culture fit for the New Orleans Saints. And if they're looking for a defensive coach, Eric Bieniemy would certainly make a ton of sense. Brian Flores would certainly make a bunch of sense there. Eric Bieniemy is another one. So he is coming up, hopefully, for the New Orleans Saints, offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you have three others that either were interviewed or that the Saints were interested in but never got the chance to interview. That is Byron Leftwich of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brian Daboll of the Buffalo Bills, who is now with New York, and then Doug Peterson over in Jacksonville, as we referenced earlier. So when we talk about an extensive coaching search, the New Orleans Saints have talked to, or at least reached out to, almost as many head coaches as there are head coaching positions open in the NFL at the beginning of the offseason. They have done a very extensive search, just like they promised. And when you look at these guys, Dennis Allen, Aaron Glenn, Brian Flores, all defensive guys. Special teams coordinator in Darren Rizzi. Then you've got offensive guys in Eric Bieniemy, Byron Leftwich, Brian Daboll, and then Doug Peterson. So they've really sort of stretched out that entire spectrum in terms of offensive coaches, defensive coaches, all of that, and making sure that they're really hitting sort of a wide variety of different focuses that they can bring in and get a bunch of different perspectives of. And we've talked about the connections that a lot of these guys have, and that's another place where Eric Bieniemy sticks out, is that he doesn't really have the Parcells connection that almost every one of these other guys does. And to me, that's important. That's an important note, because if he doesn't have the Parcells connection, but everyone else that they're sort of interested in and that they've at least interviewed so far does have that Parcells connection, specifically the ones that they have interviewed so far, right? That means something to me, because if they're still interested in him, then clearly they're interested in him not because of the sort of seamless transition that he could create, but because of what he offers in terms of upside. I would say the same thing for a guy like Byron Leftwich, for instance. So just a couple of interesting notes there. Now let's talk about the timeline, right? How quickly can we expect the New Orleans Saints to pull the trigger here? Mickey Loomis has been pretty straightforward and been pretty consistent about this idea for quite a while now so far throughout the offseason, and that is simply that there's no rush. They're taking their time. So far as we've looked at this, there have only been two coaches that they have shown interest in that are now off the board because they've taken jobs elsewhere. Brian Daboll happened pretty quickly. Doug Peterson just happened, or is set to happen here on Thursday night, at least as I record this. So the timeline really shows you that there's not much of a rush, because a lot of the guys that they're interested in are still available, and perhaps their top guy is already within the organization anyway, and they know that he ain't going anywhere because Chicago has filled up their spot with a fantastic coaching hire, which you can hear more on over at Locked On Bears with Lauren Cox. And so you have all of these opportunities here to see the way that the New Orleans Saints are disseminating and looking very deeply in terms of what it is they could potentially bring in at that head coaching spot. This is very important, right? We talked about Tom Brady's retirement. We talked about the Atlanta Falcons being 2 years late on a rebuild that they should have started in 2019. We've talked about the Carolina Panthers having no idea who they are at this point, hiring Ben McAdoo as their offensive coordinator. There are a lot of different things here that elevate the importance of this decision. So it's great to see the Saints not rushing into it. It's great to see the Saints, though, being casting a wide net, right? And creating that extensive coaching search that we had hoped for. My expectation would be that you're going to get a hire, obviously, before the combine, where you start to look at prospects based upon the vision of the team, which right now could be a little bit questionable in terms of what the vision of the team will become once a head coach is named. And so you already have Jeff Ireland. You have a fantastic college scouting department. You have a prototype. You have a system of prototypes that you like for your team. That's probably what they're using to scout right now. But will things shift once you have a head coach in place and when you're really, really starting to scout as you get closer and closer to that NFL draft in April? So something to take a look at there. The last thing I want to look at is just blowing up the roster and why the New Orleans Saints don't want to do it. I just want to take you back very quickly for a quick second because I don't want your heart to hurt too much. But I do want to take you back to 2014, 15, and 16. In those 3 seasons, the New Orleans Saints could have made a lot of really, really drastic decisions. But instead of them overturning the entire coaching staff, overturning the entire roster, doing all that, they identified who the cultural pieces were that they wanted to maintain, and they made upgrades within the front office in order to be able to address team building. They moved responsibilities as opposed to moving bodies. And I think that that was a really, really smart decision by the Saints. I think that they know that success. They remember that success going from 2016 into 2017, and they're looking to replicate it because of how important continuity and cohesion have always been for the New Orleans Saints when it comes to the off season. So that's why I think the New Orleans Saints are in a really, really good position here still. They have the options that they like. They're not in any hurry to get it done, and there's nothing drastic that's happening that has to push the process to happen any faster. So I think they're in a really, really good space in terms of where they need to be to make the right decision and the most impactful decision for their franchise to continue to be impactful and competitive in 2022. Next, we're going to talk about 2022 a little bit more because we've heard a lot of different things around the Senior Bowl, but one of the most interesting notes to come about is whether or not you should expect Michael Thomas to be a New Orleans Saint in 2022. I'll tell you what we're hearing. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get there, we want to talk to you about Built Bars, the best tasting protein bars on the market. Somebody came up, they tried to hand me one of those really like gritty, nasty ones, and I just straight up slapped it out of their hand. I haven't talked to them ever since. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. But I love me some Built Bars, and I already had them, so I wanted to go ahead and eat them. They're fantastic. Let me tell you a little bit more about them. We're talking about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, low in sugar, low in carbs, all that, but you're getting 17 grams of protein, and you're getting a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar covered in 100% chocolate, despite only having those 4 grams of sugar. And that compares to some other candy bars out there that are 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and certainly aren't giving you the protein that you need at all. But don't just take my word for it. You can head over to Built.com right now, order yourself. I recommend the sample box so that you can get a bunch of different flavors and all that, figure out which ones are your favorite, and then you can go back and customize your own box with up to 3 different flavors over there. And the best way to do that is by using that promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. Don't forget it's the numerals 15, so you can get 15% off of your order over at Built.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic, so let's dive right in. As always, I appreciate you very much for being here. Make it as your first listen of the day. Michael Thomas. There has been so much discussion about Michael Thomas. Is he going to be a New Orleans Saint in 2022? Is he not? What happened in 2021? Did that fracture the relationship between Michael Thomas and the New Orleans Saints? Now Sean Payton is out. How does that impact all of it? Well, what we're hearing so far, and you're already starting to see this all over the place, is that Michael Thomas is expected to be back in New Orleans in 2022. And that is huge news for the New Orleans Saints, especially when you have a big time changeover coming at 2 key spots: head coach, quarterback, all of that. So if this is true, if what we're hearing is correct, that Michael Thomas is back in 2022, the transition going to the next quarterback becomes that much easier because you have a go-to target. The big question is going to be, can Michael Thomas come back and be as much of himself as he can be, right? when you've missed an entire year of football, basically a year and a half of football, if you kind of look at the cumulative time over the course of the 2020 season, coming back from that ankle injury, everything, how is your cutting? How are you as a route runner? How are you in terms of getting back into the rhythm of things, getting back into the swing of things? You have to solve all those problems. But that's, you've got mini camp, you've got training camp, you've got preseason, you've got time to get all of that figured out. So it seems that whatever was happening, the rift between Michael Thomas and the New Orleans Saints, it looks like they're willing to put it all behind them. And this is important for the New Orleans Saints for two reasons. As we talked about, the transitions at premier positions, of course, which we'll circle back to here in a sec. But the other piece is cap relief. This now, if you're intent on having Michael Thomas come back, you now have the opportunity to restructure his contract, kick some more cans down the road, which you know the New Orleans Saints love to do with their cap space, and open up some more money in terms of knocking down that $74 million overage that they have. They've got roster bonuses that they can move. They have base salaries that they can move. So there's a lot of opportunity here to go ahead and create yourself some breathing room with Michael Thomas staying on the roster, as opposed to having to create breathing room by getting him off of your roster. The next thing, or coming back to that quarterback spot, Michael Thomas isn't somebody that's necessarily going to push the ball deep. We know that. He is somebody that operates very well in the short and intermediate area. He was perfect for Drew Brees in that way. And I think that there's something to be said about what we saw with Jameis Winston this past season. When Jameis Winston was throwing fewer passes, 20-plus yards down the field in terms of percentage of dropbacks than Trevor Siemian, that shows you that the New Orleans Saints were willing to keep things a little bit more condensed, keep to the high percentage options closer to the line of scrimmage. That should continue to work well for Michael Thomas and the New Orleans Saints. Even with Sean Payton gone, I could see them still predicating the offense in those short and intermediate areas, utilizing Alvin Kamara out the backfield as a pass catcher, getting rid of that up the middle role that he had to fill in 2021 so he can be a little bit more dynamic, get the ball out in space, get the ball out in the zone runs, and work with the gap scheme, which we've also seen, by the way, in Kansas City, right? We've seen it work extremely well with Jerick McKinnon. We've seen it work for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And so when you look at, that circling back to the Eric Bieniemy interview, the run game even feels familiar for these players. So when you have a Michael Thomas, that gives you that extra blocker on the perimeter for the outside zone. That gives you the guy that you can throw a quick slant to. That gives you the guy that sees the field the same way your quarterback sees the field. And so when you have a safety biting down in the box and he has a choice route, he knows to push it vertical as opposed to come underneath. And then the quarterback sees that same thing. So the communication that you get with a Michael Thomas helps a young quarterback. You look at Teddy Bridgewater, who won 5 games with him. You look at Taysom Hill, who performed well with Michael Thomas. You didn't see a drop-off with Michael Thomas at the quarterback spot. Actually, a lot of us talked about how Michael Thomas saved the quarterback position for the New Orleans Saints while Drew Brees was dealing with injury. So now you have the opportunity to really step into this era without Drew Brees, this era without Sean Payton, with one of your biggest staples, one of the biggest pieces in your offense, and that is Michael Thomas, who is expected to be back in the 2022 season, at least at this point. Remember, anything can happen. We never say never, especially when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, but I hope that you will never say never to an episode of Locked On Saints and that you'll be here every single day. And I thank you so much for being here for another episode and for making us your first listen of the day. Y'all have a fun and safe weekend. Be back with you on Monday talking Senior Bowl, talking HBCU Combine, just getting you caught up on all the storylines, everything that you need to know around your beloved New Orleans Saints. And now that you're done here, make sure you go and check out your boy Q, handicapping expert Lee Sterling, Locked On Bets podcast. Go ahead and make them your second listen. Today, win yourselves some money with those guys, especially with all the fun Super Bowl props coming up. Lots of good stuff to get in on. So once again, y'all, I thank you very much for making me a part of your day and making me a part of your routine on a daily basis. Don't forget, for everything else you need around the New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.